Thank you, Vidhu, for a wonderful introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Shankar Subramnian, moderator for this panel discussion today. To begin with, let me welcome all the panelists on the board, and I'm equally excited to moderate the discussion where we have a very highly experienced panelists who have excelled in the field of professional pursuit. The topic of our discussion today is challenges in security management in new mode of business and industrial activity. The topic is as interesting as our panelists, very relevant in today's context, considering the challenges which we are facing, resultant of a pandemic battling through last 1 year and unfortunately still continue to do so, and forcing us to redefine everything both personally and professionally. On a personal level, I think we have shifted our focus from we to I, and on a professional level, we are trying to redefine our workspace, process, engagement, etc. And the only parameter to redefine this whole process is stay safe, stay healthy. That is the common punchline, I think, which has been used all throughout in the current scenario. The impact of COVID is all around, needless to mention. I think everybody has experienced it, every individual, every strata of society, every organization has experienced the impact of COVID, and it has impacted every aspect of our life, be it behavioral, psychological, social, and economical aspect. The situation has forced us to think every aspect of life on how to rebuild it from a current environment which has been disrupted totally. And I personally believe the word positive has never instilled such a negative feelings in the history of mankind, which we are experiencing now. But as we say, necessity is the mother of all invention. We have been evolving daily to beat this situation. I think every individual, every business, every organization is fighting this situation day in and day out, and they are coming out with very innovative ways of handling the current situations. So this is a small startup I want to put across to all the team members, all the panelists we have. And my first question here, I'd like to put it to our eminent panelist, Colonel B.C. Pandey. So, what is your thoughts on how the Indian industries have adapted to the and challenges it's brought in managing the business? Like with your experience, how do you see that? What is your thoughts on that?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shankar Subramanian. And thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity to speak. And thank you, your first question to me, Mr. Subramanian. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, very much so.
All right. So, see, without going into the describing the impact of the COVID in detail, uh, I see it as a crisis of health and humanitarian uh, of proportions. The biggest thing that I see. Uh, that takes us to our individual approach to health, to the healthcare industry looking after it, and then to the humanitarian areas. The healthcare industry was hugely stressed, but in India, uh, once the initial lockdown were handled, they were able to create infrastructure and they were able to cope up with it with lots of difficulties, and a lot of them, the people involved in the healthcare services, uh, lost life. But we've been able to manage it to a great extent, very satisfactorily, and the future is looking better with the vaccine round the corner. The future in terms of healthcare is looking better. Humanitarian crisis is something that we have not been able to resolve as on date because it's been a huge disruption in lives and livelihood. The disruption in lives have been people, huge millions of workforce losing their employment. Uh, and then those who are working and working remotely from their home or from anywhere, the families not being together, worrying about each other. And I, being in the area of life coaching, have seen more than 160 couples, young couples, who have had who faced personal crisis because earlier both of them were working. They
Right.
would go to their workplace early morning and
Right.
come back in the evening. If they felt stressed, probably they went for some social outing or some dinner or some party outside. But this crisis forced them to stay together 24 hours, and they started understanding each other. So this understanding brought in a lot of differences amongst themselves, and there were, a lot of personal issues that came forward, which needed some sort of counseling. So I have personally done that with more than 150 people. So, and that is one big crisis on the lives of people that we have not been able to resolve. Whether the businesses have helped their employees to come out of that kind of a crisis, I'm not too sure, because if they were doing it, and all of these people that I'm talking about were coming from larger industry, the medium and the tier two and tier one uh, kind of industry. So I assume, and it is a good indicator, that this crisis has not been resolved. It remains, and how it is going to be resolved in future, one is not too sure. Livelihood. Uh, Millions of people have lost their jobs, especially the casual workers, the contract workers. Uh, some of them have gone back to their natives where they have very little to do. Some state governments in India have taken certain steps. For example, the government of Uttar Pradesh have created uh, yeah, a district, a product, and a lot of those people have been employed. Some new initiatives have been taken by the government in creating new infrastructure in terms of the highways and other projects, where some of them are getting employed. But this workforce crisis from the industry, which is the bigger employer, especially the SME sector, the SME sector, which is the major employer of the people, have not been able to resolve this crisis. And how long it is going to take, it's a matter of, I mean, that only future can tell us. We cannot predict at this point in time. So this year of 2020 has been an year of losses. Losses in terms of jobs, losses in terms of life around the globe, losses in terms of inequalities surfacing at proportion, the blacks and whites in America, the labor workforce in India, migration of this kind of proportion that had happened in India from various cities to the natives, and then loss of learning for millions of children in schools. Although the online learning was started in many schools, but it has not reached, with some statistics, some surveys that people have conducted, to 65% of the children. The problem is not just the online learning. In many government schools and in some private schools, which are not in the elite category, their teachers themselves are not IT savvy. They cannot conduct classes online. They are unable to log in with themselves, and the help cannot go to them, to all individuals. And a lot of parents stopped paying their school fees, where the schools could take on the kind of providing infrastructure that they would have required to provide to the teachers. And some of the teachers did not have the kind of infrastructure that they should have had. So we've not been able to actually also resolve this loss of education to a large extent. Now, so we have seen a huge transition. Do I have time? How much time do I
Yeah,
have?
yeah, please, sir,
Uh,
please, please, sir. Please, sir, please,
okay.
sir. We have
So
enough
we've seen
time
a
to have
huge
a
transition.
good discussion.
All right. So we have had we've seen a huge transition. We were doing business as usual, normal business, and then a sudden lockdown because of the pandemic. Now, this was a big uncertainty. It came as a surprise to everyone. And then there was a slow restart. Once the restart happened, at number of in number of countries and number of cities, there has been a second wave, and in some places there is a third wave. So this has been a complete year of uncertainty, and how leadership is maneuvering the human resources and the businesses out of this uncertainty is not very clear. Some of them are doing it, but a large number of them are actually not certain as to how to maneuver out of it. And there is not much of consultancy and help available
Correct.
around, because no one has seen this kind of a crisis unfolding in the past. Something happened in 1918, but it was not of this kind of
This
proportion,
magnitude.
though
Yes.
the casualties at that point in time were much more than what
Much
we
more
have
than
had
this.
due to pandemic.
That
The
is correct.
spread of this has been widespread. So now this disruption that is likely to be caused by the second and the third wave is an issue. Uh, the IT industry, by and large, be it small or large, uh, have been able to manage remote working, working from home or working from anywhere. Now, this has brought in another big issue uh, of the cybersecurity, the endpoint hygiene, because they set up the infrastructure of remote working in a short span of time of a month and a half. The endpoint hygiene of these remote workers was not properly set up, and the capability of the security setup of these
Is
companies and
also
the security industry was not was not geared up to handle a crisis of this nature. So the incident response system was a challenge, because we had never catered for this kind of an incident response system, that there will be such mobility in the enterprise working, and we should be able to handle this kind of a. And this problem has been more pronounced in case of SMBs. This where the workers, the employees were using their personal devices. What kind of a security arrangement they had in their personal devices is a question. And the security apparatus reaching out to these, securing these personal devices and the personal home network has been a big question. Now, what is therefore the risk? The risk of data loss or data compromise, not only of the person who is using his or her personal device, that of the organization and that of the customer. Have we handled that?
sure.
I'm not too sure. But to a large extent, especially in the SME sector, I do not think this endpoint hygiene has been ensured. Uh, I do not have
Perfect.
any data to substantiate
Fair
that.
point. So
So,
well,
all right.
so
Yeah.
we take that point, sir. Taking that point, I have to say that one such business which has been working relentlessly is our security industry. I also come from a security industry. Even lockdown, we were completely active as if like we were completely on the ground, trying to understand the situation, bring support system to that. And it has also redefined its purpose. What I understand in last about a year's time, the security as a concept is also getting redefined. Its engagement and has emerged as an essential service as well. So today people look at security as an essential service. Essential service which has got very high level of priority. Here I'd like to seek some insight from our panelist, Major Paul. How do you think the security industry has evolved during COVID and encashed the opportunities? Because the situation has also given us a lot of opportunities at the same time. So how has security as an industry has evolved during this time and encashed those opportunities? I'd like to hear you also.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar, and thank you, IISM, for hosting me today. This is a very interesting discussion. I know people have been discussing about this, but there is still a lot of angles that has not yet been covered. I'm sure of that. So first of all, obviously, this particular pandemic has had a socio-economic impact, and unlike other issues which is happening, it is a multi-geographical impact. So it's not that it's only in India or it's only in South Asia; it's been across the world. So, if I have to take a reference, that we normally look at the West to say that, oh, they are much more prepared than us, but this particular, what should I say, this pandemic has brought all of us at the same level. So, nobody can really say that they have been better prepared than others, especially the larger countries. The smaller countries have been a little bit better prepared. So coming back to your question about how prepared were we? So first of all, we were not prepared. The industry was not prepared. So people say that is this a black swan event? So it is not a black swan event, but there was a couple of incidents which have happened earlier. SARS have happened, which had got a more higher mortality rate, but okay, it was confined to a certain geographical area. But what happens is that all of us human beings have got this positive bias by which we try to live with, and we assume that tomorrow is going to be better than. I mean, it's a human thing. I too have that in huge quantities. That's a problem, and that is with almost everybody. So one of the biggest thing is that like the earlier panelists had said that uh, if I can say so, if I can be self-critical, safety security has been one of the most least spectacular of the functions in an enterprise. And
Absolutely.
the least paid person and the least qualified of the persons ended up becoming the most important person. So you had cases of the CEO wanting to know the number of the supervisor, the security guard, and other such persons because he wanted some information of what was happening on ground. So we ended up becoming a business enabler. So a couple of my colleagues have kept saying that security is uh, in the field of security. We don't compete. We don't compete against each other. The a different organization can compete with each other, but for us, we don't compete with each other. We have to collaborate with each other. So that has happened in a big way. So the security agent, peer network came into big way. So like I am actively involved in the ACES network in India, and ACES is the world's largest collection of security professionals. So we are in a big way in India. We got some 4 to 5 chapters. We got numerous WhatsApp groups. Information keeps flowing. It depends upon what is the amount of information that we want. And thankfully, the expertise within these groups ensured that we were not lacking for answer. So that's a good point. The business looked at us for various things that earlier, which was not, people never imagined it. Like, for example, people expected us to understand the governmental guidelines which are coming in, to interpret
Yeah.
it, to ensure that how it's going to impact the person on the ground,
Yeah.
how and what should I say, how to interact with the governmental agencies. And thankfully, being in the profession that we are, the way we can interact, we have had chances of interacting with the law enforcement authorities. So that has helped us. People have asked us, we have had questions of movement of expats inward as well as outward. We had a VIP movement which were required to be held. You had to talk to multiple people. So basically, what I want to say is that persons were looking at us as a one-stop shop for providing solutions whenever they were getting stuck. I've heard stories of security persons going over and beyond their work of, what should I say, uh, leveraging their sources, leveraging the vendors to go and hand over, what should I say, laptops, which was not with people before the lockdown started. So that has also happened. So this might sound to be very trivial, but it is not. We became an business enabler. Earlier, one of the major points, what is major points that the security professional had was that the business did not listen to us, but now the business is wanting to listen to us. The, and the onus is on us. The ball is in our court. We have got to understand that. And so, why is the business wanting to listen to us? It is because we are talking the business language, or at least majority of us have started talking the business language. It is important that we don't drop the ball. We continue to work to play with the ball and off the ball by ensuring that we understand the business better, understand the environment which is developing, and ensure that we are a problem solver, we are a solution provider. Uh, this is something. These are some thoughts which I've had for the security industry, and I'm very happy to say that people have stepped up. People have stepped up. More often than not, people have stepped up. I find whenever I call my colleagues earlier, nowadays it's very difficult to get my colleagues on the phone because more often than not they are on some phone call discussing whether they're going to come back to office or whether they're going to come stopping to not. I mean that there are a lot of surveys happening, and these surveys are giving information to the management. There have been surveys conducted by different think tanks about what should be the approach of the management towards these guidelines. What and I understand that the distribution of vaccine also in the time to come is going to be a major issue, and how it's going to happen. So I mean, it's too big. I can't understand the implications of it. So yeah, Shankar, this is some thoughts of mine. Back to you.
Great, Major. I think you have put all the points in a very crystallized and a structured manner. One of the things I'd like to just add today, even the scope of security personnel have widened up. Even if I take a basic security guide today earlier, who was actually securing the entry point of a particular premises or a particular office or a particular building, today his scope is also widened up. So he has to not only allow people inside, but he has to check the compliance, he has to check the temperature, he has to check the social distancing. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Shankar, that's what. So I'm very happy to say that these
Yeah,
security guards have got very minimal educational qualification, and
correct.
their soft skills are still on the developmental issue. There are certain
Absolutely.
organizations who have invested time and effort, and I'm very
Yeah,
happy to say that these guys have worked much beyond what a normal person expected them. We must,
absolutely.
in my organization, we have been thankful to these organizations. We have told them that you guys have really done a great job. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's a reality aspect. That's a reality aspect. Yes, sir. So,
See,
having said that, so we'll complete
can
this
I?
round and then
Okay,
we can add
okay.
some. Sure. So every organization was trying to get back to a revival mode, since that was the only way for every organization to survive. Because having a lockdown seen for 4 months, each organization has seen how vulnerable they are. So they were all working on the revival plan. Here, I would like to ask our expert, Mr. Suhas, like during lockdown, some of the industries have suffered badly, especially if you look at the hospitality industry, the hotel industry, the timeshare industry, the aviation industry, etc. So, do you have any views, any suggestions, any for the revival? What could have been their possible solutions? How they could have relooked at the whole business model? Can you share some thoughts on that, sir?
Certainly, certainly. Am I audible?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Okay, okay, great. So, yeah, I've been hearing the panelists, and I also heard the morning sessions to an extent. People are saying that this pandemic has been a great leveler. Having said that, we would say that all of us sitting on this panel are quite fortunate not to get the brunt of the pandemic to an extent to which some of our other colleagues have got it. And I
Absolutely.
think we must thank probably our parentage or our backgrounds for that. Um,
Absolutely.
Having said
Absolutely.
that, yes, yes, on the industrial front, yes, certain industries fared very badly. Obviously, the hospitality, as you said, the travel industry, for that matter, the manufacturing that I represent. And I
Correct.
represent
Correct.
both manufacturing as well as high technology. Initially,
Correct.
I would say, because since the lockdown came very drastically, very suddenly, people didn't have a chance to give a good incident response. I mean, we had to take some things, stop certain processes at that stage, even let go, because saving employees or saving your people was the first priority. And with that, some abrupt decisions were taken. So, to answer your question, the revival strategies were both short term and long term. In the short term, the strategy was force preservation, and I think we have two gentlemen from army here, so they would understand what I'm talking about. So you're just trying to make sure that your resources and your people are preserved for even a greater catastrophe or even a greater issue that might strike you at a later stage. So that was, I think, our first priority at that point in time. And then as we started moving forward, as the reality started sinking in, that this is not a short-term thing like the kind of uh, the nature's furies that we have witnessed, which sometimes gets over in 1 day, 2 day, maximum a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks kind of. This is probably going to stay with us for a longer amount of time. And initial estimates of a quarter, two, and now we're talking about a year or maybe going beyond a year. So, in terms of the long term strategies, I think companies will have to look at it more holistically. Initially, we saw some knee-jerk reaction, and I think one of the panelists, I think Colonel Pandey, rightly mentioned the large companies or the medium-scale companies or the tier one companies. Millions of people have lost their job. So that's kind of a knee-jerk reaction that when, as an organization, I've been hurt, I will immediately kind of get go some of my staff and try and save my ship, my organization. Correct? And very interestingly, I read across a startup CEO other day who was posted on LinkedIn saying, "We survived this pandemic by taking voluntarily pay cuts, by keeping all of our forces together. And now we have started paying them back for the cut that they have taken, and we might even think of giving a small increment at the next year's beginning." So I would say that's
Yeah.
the revival strategy which I like is more employees first,
Yeah.
so that they start working towards customer delight. Because unless your employee itself is, making sure that he is getting what he wants, he is not going to give his best towards your organization or towards your customers. And I mean, you might say that 20% of the workforce lost, but remember the 70% of the workforce which is back end is continuously thinking. Something is running on their mind. I mean, that was not my turn. I was lucky then, but I don't know when
Yeah.
things will me. And then you're not effectively giving your best out. So the strategy in my mind is, organizations have to think what's the purpose for which they are existing and not for the profit that they are existing. And I
Sure.
think that has been the biggest lesson that all of us have got in this pandemic
Yeah.
is work for the purpose, not work for the profit. I mean, our metrics are unfortunately profit oriented. All of the organizations are being measured on shareholders' wealth rather than
Right.
stakeholders' wealth. So I think that needs to change. And somebody rightly mentioned about effective leadership. All of the leaders, all of us have to think in this direction as to how we could change the way we have been measured, change the way we have been doing things and monitoring ourselves. In terms of good management and good governance is another thing which I think is should come up as a revival strategy. So it's not only how things are happening, but how we are going to govern ourselves going forward. From a cohesive working together in an office, where I think to an extent we were more secured or more deemed secured. I may use the word because in security we are never completely 100% secure, but at least we had a sense of security there because we had a structure around us which was protected. From that, we have distributed, we are decentralized, and everybody has gone back to their own cluster or their own homes, which are not as secured at this point in time. But I must say that the security community came up very well, and I know that they had a very short span of time, but they responded in a really good way, so that we all could actually deliver our work from our respective home offices and in fact became more productive, because that's another thing which this pandemic gave off is the productivity in certain industries have gone manifold. when people started
Yeah.
working at home. And I myself look at saving at least my 2 to 3 hours of travel, which used to happen every day, and don't know when the things open whether I'll be able to take that now. So that's kind of interesting things coming up. And I think in the keynote panel, Mr. DC Patak talked about imagination, leaders imagining and making sure that their people are working on those imagination. I think that's a key revival right now, that all of us have to imagine how different we could do things, how we could find out some collaborative answers through this. And I think the combination of all of these that I talked about, which is the employee first, making us is purpose based, being more imaginative, and being more collaborative in this space. Because in my mind, technology was always there. Technology to work remotely, technology to work from home was always there. We had the same team, the same Zoom, same Webex, which we are using today. I don't think a new tool was invented just because of the pandemic. I think it was in our minds that we were not allowing our employees to work from home because we wanted to see their faces. And we truly believe the way we have been brought up is unless people are together, work doesn't happen. Certainly, the younger generation, like if I look at my kids, they were pretty much used to work remotely. And they have been interacting with their colleagues through their mobile devices. Sometimes we used to tell them that keep away the mobiles and meet people in person. Unfortunately, we have started emulating them now because we have taken the mobile devices, we have gone away from people. So I believe it was more in the mindset of the leadership than the technology as a challenge. So I think I would stop here and allow others to speak so that we can have one more round of thoughts
Yeah,
coming in.
yeah,
Thank you.
exactly. Excellent, Suhas. It was very well placed. Just would like to add few points there. Of course, there are many companies who are looking at trying to expand their product portfolios, trying to be more relevant during that particular time, especially companies like Asian Paints, Nippon Paints. They started venturing into manufacturing your hand sanitizer product because they wanted to keep the entire process live and trying to avoid any gap in the whole operation. So those were the things which few of them have done. Customer engagement has also changed the way it was done before and the way it is done now. I think companies have evolved in the process of engaging with the customer remotely successfully, especially if you see the automobile companies today. Today, people seldom visit the showroom, whereas a user gets a full experience back at home. So, yes, very well put across this to us. I think that was quite interesting. Now comes to
True,
a
true.
very important.
Just,
Sorry.
just one thing,
Yeah,
if I can add, some of my marketing colleagues are now started saying that their
yeah,
traveling is going to be seriously questioned by management henceforth,
yeah,
because they're
very true.
saying, now you're not traveling,
Yeah.
but still the business is coming in. Was there any need for you to
Absolutely.
travel so much?
And alternatively, if you look at it, organizations are saving substantially by avoiding the travel, which used to cost a substantial amount in the overall P&L as well. So there is a pluses at both the sides. So yes, sir. So coming to we at this point, we have a very important challenge which we can discuss and would like to understand from our panelist, Mr. Jeffrey. I think he is rightly apt to help us and give a much wider global perspective on this. Sir, with the COVID still ranging at large, how do you think that businesses to respond in an environment of economic gloom with falling GDP? I think the situation is very common across geographies on a global level. So, how do you look at it, sir? What are your points on that?
Well, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for the IISSM for the invitation to be here. I go back to what Colonel Pandey said, and I add to his health, humanitarian, and lifestyle, but then there's the economic consequences. And I think in corporate, what we will have is that a lot of the large buildings, the corporate offices, will they still need that same footprint? Will they need that real estate? Will more people continue to work from home? And what would be the consequences of that? What will be the consequences for that for security? Will we need as many security officers in a tower when it's half empty? What about construction of new office blocks? Will that continue if the working from home continues? And I think you could get 10 economists and they'd have different opinions on this. But I think
Yeah,
that that is one of those big issues about, will the CBD return to normal? Will people go back to retail rather than online shopping? And what are the
Yeah.
consequences for security in that? We know that international air travel will probably take another 12 months at least to recover to where it was in January 2020. Um, what about the cruise ships? In Australia, we've said no cruise ships for another 3 months. And then how do we manage that? So probably cruise ships are going to be in the same basket as airlines with that international travel between countries. Now we may get domestic travel, but so if you just look at the hospitality, I think that will come back. I hope that will come back. But I do think in the the consequences will be there. And I think the one of the big learnings here, yes, if this had happened 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had the technology that we've got today to assist us. So
Right.
technology was a good thing. Technology, thankfully, in 2020 is better than it would have been, in 2000. But in any crisis, it's the quality of the people that come to the fore. It's the quality of the leadership, I think, and you know, the business continuity plans. I mean, the Australian government had a pandemic plan from 2006. Was it sufficient for COVID-19? No. Were most businesses prepared? No. Was their business continuity plans adequate? No, not really. So I think there will be a greater emphasis on managing non-financial risk going forward. I think boards and management will look at risk management in a different light and saying, are we flexible enough and agile enough? Are our suppliers agile enough and flexible enough to be able to sustain serious global issues like a pandemic rather than a flood or a fire or a terrorist attack, which seems, is often more isolated than something as global as this. So, I think what Major Devesey said with ACES and those, I think having the access to peers and being able to collaborate, share experiences across sectors is very, very important. Um, we, we're not there for a commercial advantage for our organisations. We're actually there to assist in the viability of those businesses, and that's about protecting those businesses, protecting the people that work in them firstly, and then protecting the business itself, the assets, and then the reputation of the business. And some businesses won't come back. They won't come back because they've suffered enormous financial losses because of the sector they're in. Some won't come back because they haven't been able to respond to the challenge of this, um, and they've suffered reputational damage. So I think there will be a change in the architecture of and structure of leadership in businesses going forward. And I think, therefore, it is an opportunity for the security industry to say, have our leaders responded to this adequately? Um, does business respect the contribution that security can provide? We want lawyers and we want accountants, and they're held in high regard. But the security person should be held in equal high regard if that person is capable of contributing to the business in the same manner. And I think that will be a challenge for us all. So I think going forward, businesses will look at their capability of being more resilient going forward. They'll look at the lessons of this. But some businesses, unfortunately, as we've spoken about, aviation and those, I think they've got a long, long road to recovery. And unfortunately, some without government assistance, they won't survive.
Great, great, Jeffrey. I think you have articulated it very well in detail. And from that point, I will just take it forward. Like organizations are evolving to beat the current situation that every organization is working very hard, I would say, and they are also adapting various techniques to do it. So every organization is trying to work out how this is workable for them, may not be a uniform matter, but yes, it is working for them. So one of the development was work from home. That is something where people earlier considered to be a first, but today it has become a necessity that we are working from home in a given situation. Here, let us understand from Mr. Suhas, while work from home is gaining acceptance and companies are also adopting the same due to various reasons, how technology can ensure productivity and data security? What do you say on that one?
So I think in the previous question, I did mention that technology was
Yeah,
never a challenge for home, right? So technology did exist. It was the mindset issue that we had. Having said that, of course, there are two types of industry that we're looking at. One where things could be digitally delivered, and that's an industry where we were geared up, but we had not taken the call. I think, as Jeffrey rightly said, there were investment made in huge office setups in infrastructure now, and we wanted everyone to sit together and work because we believe that's the way collaboratively more work can happen, right? So
yeah,
this is an
correct.
industry which could very well adopt to working from home, and in fact, I would say that in that sense, in our IT industry, we are saying that this pandemic was a great digital transformer to that extent because many of my CIO colleagues were actually planning on great many digital initiatives, and they had planned anywhere between 6 months to a year to do that. And because of pandemic, things happened either in 15 days to 2 months because many organizations whose emails were in-house, they suddenly went on the Google Mail or Office 365 or something similar, and that happened very quickly. And because there was no choice, everybody has to adopt it. And I think that's one of the key of implementation, right? When people adopt it quickly, your implementations become more successful. So to that extent, COVID did help us. When I look at the other industry, which has to be, do their task physically. So, for example, when I look at the manufacturing industry, or for that matter, to a great extent, the hospitality industry also, they suffered badly because for them it's not possible to give you the same experience or create the same products or services just sitting at home. They they will have to physically go back to their workplaces and produce those things for us. So they got a setback to begin with. But as we now look back, manufacturing industry is trying to look at the digital part of it, and I believe because of COVID, the industry 4.0 would get a great momentum now because we now started getting inquiries from people saying that help us to automate our industry. That leadership is now trying to gear up that if something happens in the future, I have to be ready to create my products and services with minimum people coming inside my factory. So, well, in a normal circumstances, I will permit that. But even something like this happen, I need some of my key people to sit at home and operate. Because today, when in the industry people have started coming back, we still have a challenge of people who are above a certain age group that they are still reluctant to come back to work. They still prefer to work from home either because of the fear in their mind or the family pressures or some other elder person in your family. So and we now have to make sure that we are able to get this done. So in my mind, technology was never a challenge. Productivity, in fact, that came as a very surprise that productivity has increased to a great extent. So again, I will go back to our leadership qualities that more number of meetings, more number of physical meetings, people were wasting their time. At the same time, I'm also seeing the trend which is happening now. If our same leadership qualities come in, I'm seeing more number of virtual meetings happening. So we might quickly lose the gains of productivity that we have got initially, and all of us have to watch it and make sure that we consolidate on those gains and we kind of go forward. Data security, yes, certainly. We were hit back with a major challenge, and most of us probably ignored it to begin with because there was no choice. The need of the hour was to start and keep running, and probably to that extent, people took a lot of chances because Nobody knew their laptops were getting used by their kids or their family members because sometimes the resources were inadequate, and we were exposing ourselves to security challenges through that. But as we go forward, yes, our CISO colleagues have stepped in and they have created good securements. Having said that, we will also have to ensure, and I think zero trust gain more importance because of that. Because you said when people were coming into my premise, I knew that this is the person who's coming in and this is the person who's working on my trusted device. When the person is
Correct.
not in front of me, I'm not too sure whether is it the same person accessing that secure device or somebody else. So I have to create this mechanism of zero trust, and now that's becoming across because it's no more hierarchy based. Everybody who's coming in
Correct.
has to ensure
That's
and
true.
prove it to me that the system trusts that person, and then only
Correct.
that goes in. Awareness and training of employees, especially your third party employees. Because,
Correct.
that's a weakest spot in your organization, third party employees working in. Ensuring that that's going in, monitoring of the third party employees because they at the same time could be working for multiple employers or multiple agencies. So you have a vulnerability over there, making sure about that. And of course, the incident response preparedness. That's how quickly we are able to detect a response and then able to respond to it. So I think that's what I would say in response to your question. Thank you.
Very well put out, Mr. Suhas. I think it's quite detailed you have explained. Since we are talking about technology and we are talking about security, I will touch upon with Colonel Bipin Pandey to please help us understand. So, what is your thoughts on usage of technology during this time? I'm talking about during this time, how technology has evolved to address the current security concern and faced by many organizations. So how do you look at that part? Has technology evolved? Has technology started playing an important role in the current scenario for providing security? Wanted to hear the thoughts from you, sir.
Thank you, Shankar. See, I want to just give it a little context to before I answer your question. When we're
Sure, sir.
looking at enterprise, when you're looking at enterprise security is not just the physical security, which is being
Correct,
provided by very lowly paid security guards.
correct, sir.
They also so enterprise security would be perimeter, physical, data, cyber, personnel, business plans
Yep,
of all. So, as
correct,
Jeffrey brought out the business continuity plans, the security
correct.
of the business continuity plans itself is a major
Yep,
area of security. Now, how technology is has evolved or has met the requisite needs of the industry. See, the hacker industry uh, is equally evolving, progressing as the
progressing.
technology to combat security is evolving. They are even faster. We have
Correct.
seen cases in Czechoslovakia where the one complete hospital where COVID patient operations were planned, it went haywire. Uh, Everything had to be shifted, and there have been several such cases in United States when the government announced certain measures to some financial assistance and all that. Different kinds of messages and the fake news went around. Uh, the technology, as we say, is a big enabler, but how we use technology is
Is
another area. For example, we have several social media platforms. Now, the
yeah.
social media platforms are meant for social interaction. How are they being used is a different issue. We initially
Yeah.
had, in the beginning of or in the last decade of the 90s, the office productivity tools, which came in the form of emails and all of those things that came. Now, they were supposed to increase our office productivity and such that we could have more time with our more personal time. But all of these tools are being carried home. Therefore, half of the office work is being done from home. This mail has to be written today. So I come back from office and open my laptop and start working on the official email that I did not do in the office. So that is how we're using technology. That's one aspect. The another aspect is, has the technology met the needs of the security? In most cases, yes. uh, Organizations which had the capability to ensure endpoint hygiene for remote workers, they were able to do it.
Yeah.
uh, uh, the workers were working from home. I have my neighbor's son who works for a financial industry, financial IT company, who provides financial services to the global audience. From Hyderabad, he came home, and is my next door neighbor. He could not carry his laptop away from the room from where he was working. It was fixed there, and if he did, it was caught. It was caught. There could be nothing else in his. So there have been the technology exists, but do all organizations have the capability to ensure and invest that kind of amount? Do all organizations have that kind of capabilities to ensure that the technology helps? No. I was talking to the other day to the National Cyber Security Coordinator of India, and he gave some specific examples which I cannot discuss here. That there have been so many breaches across the globe in many areas on security, uh, despite the implementation of the technology, because the hacker is much smarter than the normal security professional. So the challenge here for the security industry is to not just look at one simple aspect of physical security, because with the adoption of cloud, enterprise mobility, and remote working, the area of cybersecurity and the security personnel has enhanced, and the scope for the security industry to expand and to transform is unlimited uh, at this point in time. So technology technology is evolving. Technology has helped all those who could implement the technology, but not those who could not afford the cost of implementing such technology. That's that.
Great, 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 Colonel. Again, you have shared a very detailed insight on how, where the technology is impacting functional or useful in the whole gamut of security. Now, circling back to security, to a security, no better than Major Paul can address this question. How do you see the role of security evolving in the future? Because security was doing certain kind of activity, I would say pre-COVID. I can't say post-COVID because we are still in that trying to beat out the whole scenario. So, how do you see the role of security evolving in the future? Considering the situation what we are, probably some improvement might happen when nobody knows. But looking at the whole scenario, how do you see the role of security evolving in the future?
So, thanks, Mr. Shankar. So, uh, for a moment, if you remove security and you replace it with business, I think it makes more sense. How will the
Okay.
business change after COVID, or how was it working before COVID? So, so you know what? So, like I heard somewhere that I am a business professional having security enterprise. That is the right way I should put it. I am a business professional having enterprise. I mean, what should I say? Uh, expertise in security. So, presently, like I was telling in my earlier question, was that we have understood the importance of becoming a business enabler. And it's important that we continue remaining a business enabler. That's very important. Uh, how do you continue to become a business, what should I say, a business enabler? You have to professionally upgrade yourself. And this upgradation is not only limited to the CSO, but right down to the security guard. Soft skills, maybe at the security guard, maybe more information, or maybe on how to do it. There is a whole lot of work which is required. And like Mr. Suhas said, is that we like persons to be in front of us. So, so why is that? And especially from the being in the security fraternity, we are somewhat of a say control freaks. We like
Control freak.
having everything under control. So
Yeah.
when we see 4,000 employees sitting in an office again after COVID goes away,
Question mark.
I really have my doubts. I really have my doubts.
Question
So
mark. It's a
now
big.
we are really transitioning from that to co-working spaces. And like a friend of mine said, is that earlier, so there were three ways that this work was happening. So earlier, you had got work from office, which was the normal. Then COVID happened, so you had work from home, which is happening right now. And soon we will have work from anywhere, because at the end of it, you can sit in what should I say, on the beach and or else on a mountain top and sit and work, as long as you got your Wi-Fi working and you can work from there. So that is something which is going to be there. Uh, the connected point for this is that you have got to understand that a whole lot of time the staff, uh, when he does something wrong, it is not because he is wanting to do something wrong. It is because he is thinking, or he has made some logical mechanism in his mind, thinking that this is the right thing. So what I mean to say is that uh, training and awareness imparting has to be at a very high level. And this training and awareness just by sending emails will not work. Whole lot of gamification of stories, story building has to be there. You can't hope to have person sitting in front of you and you imparting training. There is not going to be too much of a difference between physical and logical security. The training which has to be given has to encompass this also. Whole lot of information on what should I say, uh, collaborative security. I mean, collaborative messaging has to go out. Messaging has to be in sync with HR, facilities, the business, and security. So all has to happen as a. It has to happen as a one team. So that important messaging has to happen. So before the messaging happens, we as corporate security professionals, we as risk professionals have got to interact with the C-suite and tell them that it it matters now that we sent out a message which is a holistic message rather than just a silo-based message telling that in case of a flood do this, in case of a cyclone do this, or else in case of extreme cold don't do that. So that is not going to work anymore. Another point which a whole lot of times I think Mr. Swahas had brought out is that we have not paid attention. Sorry, we have not paid adequate attention to the psychological aspect of persons working from home or working from wherever. So man is a social animal. We like to interact. We like to be together. So presently, being at our homes, uh, I'm very sure that none of us, our spouses, are hearing what I'm going to say now. Is that unfortunately we have started knowing our spouses too well. Uh, so that is something that we have got. I mean, and so being there is, we don't have any standoff distance, and all of us are of a certain what should I say, biological age, and because of experience we can understand what is happening. But it is very difficult for a 20-year-old guy who's come out, who has stepped out from this college campus and who's in his
Yeah.
first or a second job. He does not have a place to release his mental pressures. So again, you have got to have, it has to be a joint operation with HR, with security, with thing to engage with the employee to enforce, tell him that whatever he is doing is the right way of doing it. How he is like, again, I'll keep on referring to Mr. Suhas, or I forgot Colonel Pandey, telling that who is actually using a laptop? Is that person required to use a laptop? In certain organizations, in one of my early organizations, um, if you had to do a shared transaction, you had to inform, because that particular organization was into used to provide broking advice. Even if your wife is doing that, you're supposed to inform them. In fact, your entire family has to be. You've got to inform them. So if you have your son coming and opening up some site which the organization does not permit it, well, you're going to get into trouble. So a whole lot of aspects has to be covered, and we have got to look away from being a physical security professional and start using the word of becoming a risk professional. And the risk has to be whole encompassing and look out. Very important that you start understanding the importance of collaborating. You should not start. You should stop looking at the facility person or the infosec person or the IT person or the HR person to be somebody who's going to stop you from doing your work, but who will enable us to do our work in a better way. Thank you, Mr. Shankar.
Very true, very true. I think very well articulated, I would say. And today, if I ask my friends, I think none of them wanted to have a work from home kind of scenario from their office. Everybody says, yeah, let's go back to work. We don't want any more work from home. I think people have reached a level of saturation as well. So let's coming back to one important question. We would like to understand how various companies have worked globally with their output, with their approach, and none other than Jeffrey, who can help us to understand. So this we would like to understand from you with your exposure to various geographies. Some of the best practices adopted by companies globally to revive the business activities in the current situation. It can be sector-wise, it can be company-wise, or it can be very generic, or it can be with respect to what happened in Australia and how companies have worked around in reviving the whole scenario. I think there's some disturbance there. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can.
You
Can
can?
now.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So, Jeffrey, you are able to hear me? I was just trying to understand from you some of the best practices adopted by the companies globally. If you can just share some of those experiences, it can be sector specific or company specific, or which can help us to understand what are the things people have been doing all along.
I think the global companies, like Major Devasi has said, is really about joining on the collaboration. You know, if I'm in London, what's happening in Sydney or what's happening in New York, and trying to learn from each other, because each country has responded in a different way. But there's been I think there's certainly been the use. Cyber security is obviously at the forefront of a lot of people's thinking. There's the vulnerability of so many of the workers. Was the infrastructure there that workers could work from home, and what was the viability of their systems and structures? So that was the IT security. But then there was the large complexes that were empty, and was the old system of guards and guns and gates, if you like, adequate? And people started to use different technologies. They've started to use drones to patrol big, large areas, use CCTV in a different way. I know that there's been a lot of monitoring of wastewater to see if it contained any COVID-19 traces of COVID-19, to try and isolate it. So security has been used in that. There's been a lot of companies and countries that have gone to reduce the contact, so they've gone to non-cash. So that was a big change, going to we'd prefer credit card, we'd prefer a debit card than cash. So what does that mean for the cash in transit business? What does that mean for, that typical security structure there? How do they manage this reduction in the carry of cash? I think there was also a lot of people in big public areas like shopping centres and things where, there's been a significant increase in the number of suicides, and that security people, because they were first responders, were confronted with this the suicides that normally wouldn't be their take. In Australia and a lot of other countries where you've had hotel quarantine for inbound passengers. Now, Australia's fortunate; it's an island. It's closed its international borders and said if you arrive, you must go into hotel quarantine. Well, security have been used in those to assist the police and the medical people in those quarantines, in that managing the quarantine in the hotels. So security is being used in hospitality and retail, where governments have said there's a limit, 4 square meters per person, or there's only 100 people in here. So security have been managing access in a completely different way than they would have back in January. So they're controlling the flow of people entering a supermarket. They're actually there counting the people going out. Excuse me, I need another 10 people to come out before they let 10 people go in. So and I think that's where the flexibility of the leadership of security has changed. It's got to think laterally now. It's got to think as a business, a contributor, to the business, and come up with those solutions that the major talked about. We're the experts in security. What the difficulty, the challenge, the business. So we should contribute to those solutions. We should contribute to the intellect and ideas about how can we assist a business meet its changing objectives as it operates in a pandemic. And I think some people, some businesses have stepped up to that challenge, and probably some have found it more difficult, those that are sitting in the more traditional way of delivering a service. They'll struggle, because I think going forward, business will be more agile. They'll know that they are so reliant on the supply chain. They'll look at business continuity in a different way, and they'll manage risk differently. And their security professional will be expected to contribute differently, in my opinion, than perhaps, and be probably greater valued than they were, 12 months ago.
Okay. You mentioned, I agree. Fantastic. That's great, Jeffrey. So I think before we take up the questions which we have been receiving, I'd like to hear some closing remarks from the panelists. Whether you have any closing remarks, and each one of you, I can start with Colonel Bipin Pandey.
Thanks, Shankar. I think we have had a wonderful discussion. It was an eye-opener from all of the panelists, giving very, very specific points. So COVID-19 has been a crisis of proportions, a humanitarian crisis with the loss of lives and the livelihood. And we have to approach every industry, business, and the government has to approach it as a crisis of lives and livelihood, beyond anything else. Thank you.
Can I hear out from Major Paul? Closing remarks from your end? Paul, we are not able to hear you. Sorry, we are not.
Sorry. So here's my thought. I have always believed that we have got to collaborate for achieving success. That is one. And the next is that you being an expert security guy will not actually solve the organization problem. You have got to have security ambassadors or risk ambassadors who understand that. And if you can make the C-suite become your the risk ambassadors for the organization, then you got it made. I'm forgetting. I think some management guru had said that marketing is not the function only of the marketing department, but of the entire organization.
Their
So
organization.
marketing, remove marketing and put in risk or put in security, and
It
you
gives a
got to keep
complete
learning.
answer. Very well said. Very well said. Mr. Suhas, can I hear from you your closing remarks on this?
Sure. Before I say closing remark, let me say thanks to all my panelists, Colonel Pandey, Major Paul, Mr. Joffrey, and Shankar for a great moderation. I know I'm answering only from a perspective of business here and not from the humanitarian or a larger set of crisis. So uh, I look at the pandemic more of a leadership challenge, which is very intense, uh, pretty long term, and it's going to have far reaching impact. And as leaders, we have to be clear in our purpose. We have to set our priorities right. We have to remain positive, and finally, the show must go on.
Great, great, great. Jeffrey, can I hear your closing remarks on this discussion?
Thank you very much. And again, thank you to my fellow panelists for their contribution on this. I think this has obviously been a global catastrophe with so many loss of lives and people that will lose their livelihoods and their lives have changed. But and that is just terribly, terribly sad and disappointing. But we are resilient as human beings, and I think us in the security industry will take lessons out of this, and we will use it as an opportunity to grow our contribution to our businesses and to our countries. And I think there will be some young people out there that have just come out of university with great ideas that will see this as a challenge that we will overcome, because we will overcome it. We will overcome this, but it's an opportunity to look back and say, how do we deal with this? Was our contribution what the governments would like? Was, as an industry, was our contribution what the people wanted and what our clients wanted? And where there are gaps, it'll be opportunities for us to change the education of people, change the training of people, change the supervision and management of people. But I think, despite the enormous, terrible situation that it is, I think those of us that come out of this will use it as an opportunity to grow and enable security to be a greater contributor to the commerce and our clients going forward.
Good. Thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks. It was really, I think, it was a privilege to have all of you as a panelist. It was a good learning session for me also, hearing all of you. And I think we had exchanged a very good note on various subjects, and it was quite interesting. We have got few questions which have come up. Before we wind up, I think if we can address those questions. Uh, So one of the question is for Colonel Vipin Pandey. The question is how the new models of business, which hinges on e-mode, emerge during this phase of survival, and what is the way ahead? So how do you look at it? E-commerce or e-mode?
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
some interesting
Thank
questions.
you. Thank you for this first question, because 1 o'clock I have another engagement, so I'll quickly try and answer.
Yeah,
And then I would need your permission to leave at 1 because I have another engagement there. See,
sure, sure.
and the leadership have looked at it in 6 different ways of the impact of the COVID on the strategy, as to how the strategy should evolve in the scenario, looking at the customer behavior, the change and changing customer behavior. The new strategy has to evolve, and quickly it has to evolve. Otherwise, the survival could be difficult. The works, how to handle the workforce is another area, the model that we have to look at. How do we address the psychological needs of the workforce is extremely important to deal with. Operations, how do we re-engineer our operations? What can be automated? How digital transformation can be brought about in the uh, how digital transformation can be brought about in many areas of work where it is possible. How do we manage our finances is another area we'll have to look at. We cannot just as Suhas about uh, looking at the being profit oriented is not the only way of looking at businesses or making money. We need to look at that, and then the use of technology. How are we going to use technology? Because more often than not, technology, the purpose for which it was created and actual uses are quite different. How the leadership ensures the use of technology, and therefore the business model, after we've analyzed the impact on all of these and how we're going to survive from there, the models will emerge by changing all of these six areas of business.
Excellent. Great. Great. Thank you, Colonel Pandey. I'll come to one
Uh,
very interesting question which has been there in everybody's mind. So I really played that that situation should never come. But in case if there is another serious lockdown, Mr. Paul, question for you. Are we really geared up as a security business?
So,
This will be a little bit exciting for me also because I also come from the same industry. So that will be really interesting to know from you as well.
may I
again,
now beg my leave because I have another engagement at 1 o'clock. So, if there is
Perfectly
no
fine,
more
sir.
question
Perfectly
from
fine.
me, I will need your
No, sir.
permission.
Perfectly fine, sir.
Thank you so
Perfectly
much.
fine.
Thank you
It was
so
a
much.
pleasure talking to
Thank
you,
you.
sir, and thank you as a panelist, sir. Thank you.
I'm grateful to you, Shankar, and grateful to IISM, and I'm grateful to all of the panelists for sharing their thoughts. Thank you so very much, and look forward to hearing
Thank you.
you in future. So, thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Major Paul. If we can
okay.
hear
So,
your views
again,
on that.
yeah. Again, so what I always say is that it's not, see, security cannot exist in isolation. Security is existing because of the business requirement of we have to secure people, material, information, all these things is required. That's why we are existing. So let us be clear of that. So it's not a question of will security survive? Will the business survive? Yes, it will survive. We're going to have a lot of
Correct.
big typing will have to be there. A lot of what should I say, changes in thought process has to be there. And like one of the panelists said that you got to imagine, you got to think it out. So a lot of times you can't look at people like they are assets and they are depreciating and then
Correct.
like an army they say that you become class 5 and then you remove them from the system. No, you can't do that. You have got to
Correct.
ensure that there is a humane touch to them. A lot of times we don't do that. There have been organizations which have collaborated, which have consulted, consultative leadership has taken place. They are the persons who can survive. Like for example, I understand that you are going to remove people from the system. I understand there is a requirement for reducing the salary of the people, but communicate to them, tell them that you're going to the salary is going to get restored. Or like suppose you are removing somebody from the system, don't remove people by being vindictive. Once you remove people, tell them that if you're being removed, you will be getting the first mover advantage when the company is getting back. So these are some thoughts which is very relevant. It's very important as organizations to reach out to a vendor staff to understand, I mean, to give them reassurance that uh, it's a change scenario. We are going to require, uh, it's very important that you don't need to have an army of security guards, but you need to have empowered persons
Boss.
who will be performing duties, who will be catalyzing, who will be in petroling mode, who will leverage, what should I say, technology. So I think that is the only way we're going to survive.
Correct.
You know what? As human beings, we will survive. We've survived so much things in history. So this is also one of
Yeah.
it. So maybe the better prepared person will survive easier.
In a better manner, actually.
Thank you.
Very true, very true, very true. One interesting question for Jeffrey for you, like during this pandemic, many professions have lost their job, and now they're turning towards security professions. So we are finding a lot of new security professionals who are coming up on board. So is it a good sign or a challenge? How do you look at this?
I think it's a challenge, but I think it's a good one. I think that there will be people that will come from other industries that will have skills and experiences that we can use within the security industry. Um, I think that the current environment does produce that the risk of an insider threat. I think those people that have laid off their jobs or they've reduced in pay, some of those people, as the major said, communication is a very essential tool, but some people will feel offended and they can become a risk that we need to address. But as far as recruiting into the industry goes, because of those people there, I think that if we put the effort into proper detailed recruiting, then there will be people that will come from other industries that will, as I said, will have the skills and experiences that will actually enhance what the security industry can provide going forward.
Great, great, Jeffrey. I think very well put up the all parts. So I'll just summarize. I think all the questions we have addressed, people have given a complete in-depth understanding of that. So I'll just summarize that the four things what all panelists have put out in a very elaborate manner, in a very distinct and very clearly articulated very well. Is one is we need to have a very collaborative approach to have a successful business. We will not look at security as a business or security as a security domain. It is a business enabler. So we need to have a collaborative approach within the organization. Second, I see that leadership challenge is going to be is very concerning today because leadership will get challenged in the current scenario. They will have a long-term challenge, short-term challenge, etc. But a clarity in process and building positioning part of it will help to transform this challenge into an actionable item. That is the second learning which I am putting it across. The third is the most important I see is that uh, we need to be a little bit more compassionate. We need to take into account the feelings, the emotional part of engagement, because
Yeah.
many people have lost their livelihood. We have to engage with them uh, because the situation is not going to be the same always. There is going to be a better scenario, and when the scenario is better, we need to have them back. We need to engage with them back. So we need to work at an emotional level, engage with them for the growth of the whole industry. Well, gentlemen, it was really a pleasure talking to all of you, and would like to sincerely thank each one of you for contributing your views and making this discussion really a success. Thank you very much. Thank you.